Hi everyone online, we're going to get going in a couple of minutes. Thanks for joining us. We'll get started very soon. If you can hear me, could you just say in the chat if you're online? That'd be really helpful. Thank you. Amazing. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, take a seat. We're going to get started in about a minute.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 18th edition of TransformGov Talks. I'm Gavin, Freeguard, one of the organisers, and it's wonderful to see so many of you today here at the MOJ and joining us online as well. Today, really the hottest ticket in town, and thank God for the air conditioning. Hands up if you've been to TransformGov Talks before. Welcome back. Hands up if this is your first TransformGov Talks. Welcome. Brilliant to see so many new faces. So I should probably tell you what TransformGov Talks is in that case. It's a space for people who care about making government work better. In every event, we have 2 great presentations for you on different ways of doing that, things that are being done differently in or around government, people with different perspectives, people trying new things. We are live streaming and we are on the record. And we sort of cover all sorts of different subjects. If you look back at our website, you can see all of the previous events. We've covered everything from AI and data and digital in government to public involvement to a short history of the National Audit Office. So quite a range of different entertaining things. Very importantly, for those of you in the room, there's one other bullet point which you really need to know about, which is there's free pizza afterwards. If you're joining us online, you can run down to the MOJ. You might be able to catch some at the end. So how is tonight going to work? You're going to have 2 brilliant presentations from some brilliant speakers. I'll introduce them shortly. They're going to have about 25 to 30 minutes each to present and then take questions. In terms of the questions, if you're in the room or online, you can use Slido. Please go to slido.com. The code is 2554962. I will flash up a QR code in a second as well. If you're in the room, you can, of course, put your hands up as well. We'll be finishing probably around 7:10 as we started a little bit late. There'll be pizza and drinks, and there may even be the chance to try a board game if you're in the room tonight afterwards. And then we will be heading to the Buckingham Arms as well. So again, if you're online and you want to join us in the pub, you do have time to get down to SW1. You can see all of our previous events on our website. I'm going to have to redo this slide at some point. We've had so many different speakers since October 2024. Tonight is possible thanks to our very kind sponsors, Agile, Anmut, Siva, DXW, Holistic Agility, Public Digital, State of the Future, and TPX Impact. When you're having your free pizza, those are the people to have in mind and be very, very thankful to. We're always looking for help, as you can probably tell. If you'd like to help us organise, if you're interested in speaking, if you're interested in sponsoring and keeping us in even more free pizza, please chat to us afterwards or email transformgovtalks@gmail.com. We are your organisers. I'm Gavin, as I mentioned. We've also got Jeff and Stuart in the room tonight. Now, this is where you might want to get your phones out. There are lots of QR codes about to come at you for Slido and also for future events. If you would like to ask questions, you can use slido.com. The code is 2554962, or you can scan that QR code now, and I will talk slowly because I can see that lots of you are trying to scan it. Excellent. Great. Hopefully you all got that. Our next event will be happening on the 26th of August. It's at the Buckingham Arms, the pub that we'll be going to later. It's just summer drinks. Unfortunately, we're not paying for those drinks, so bring your wallets, but we'd love to see you. We'd love to see you for some chilled, relaxed socialising on the 26th of August. We'll then be back at the end of September for the next TGT proper, but before then, we have 2 other events. Thank you. That's good. We're going to be going out of London for the first time. On the 17th of September, we're going to be in Cardiff for the first ever TGT Cymru with Transform Wales. So do join us online or in Cardiff for that. And then the following week, we're going to be in Scotland, where Gordon Guthrie from Foundations of the Digital State and Anne Kempster from Transform Wales will be speaking at the Scottish Parliament. So again, you can find all of those details on our website if you haven't scanned the QR codes tonight. But let's turn to tonight. We've got some brilliant speakers, and I've been speaking for far too long already. So first of all, we're going to be hearing from Charlie Brown and Michael Kabady, who come from the UK Parliament, both from Hansard and the Digital Service, and they're going to be presenting Beyond and Between Our Screens, how design ethnography is informing the evolution of Hansard's technology. And they'll be followed by Katie Thorpe, Senior Fellow at the Institute for Government and Independent Learning Consultant, who'll be talking about Churn, a board game all about making good policy against the odds. More than enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Charlie and Michael.
Thank you so much, Gavin. Okay. Can you hear me? Oh, it's not coming through that. Okay, fine. So I'm going to briefly explain what Hansard is and how we produce it, and introduce how Michael ended up working with the Commons and Lords Hansard teams. So for those of you who don't know, Hansard is the official report of everything said in the public forums of Parliament. In the House of Commons, that means the Commons Chamber, the second chamber, which is Westminster Hall, and all legislative committees. The Hansard team are also responsible for delivering transcripts of select committee sittings, but those are published on the select committee's websites, not the Hansard website, so they're technically not considered to be Hansard. I imagine that some of you use Hansard in your work, so you may be familiar with that image of our website. We also produce a small daily in-house print run, and there are actually some at the front here, so I'm happy for you to pass them around. There's some House of Commons and House of Lords ones. And they eventually become an even smaller print run of the green bound volumes that you can see there. Although the complete record of Hansard is now available online back to 1803, Hansard as the official report, so that means a team of public servants paid by Parliament, has been in existence since only 1909. Its terms of reference having been set out by a select committee of the House of Commons in 1907 and included in Erskine May, which is the Bible of Parliamentary Procedure. Those are the same terms of reference that we work to today, and they underpin everything that they do. They're really important. And I'm going to read them out to you now because it will give you an idea of what Hansard really is. So they state that Hansard is a full report in the first person of all speakers alike, a full report being defined as one which, though not strictly verbatim, is substantially the verbatim report, with repetitions and redundancies omitted and with obvious mistakes corrected, but which on the other hand leaves out nothing that adds to the meaning of the speech or illustrates the argument. So I appreciate that that's quite wordy. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how this actually works in practice, we do host internal visitors and civil servants almost daily during sitting weeks to shadow reporters in the chamber. So you can have a little bit of a chat about the editing process and see how it really functions. At the end of this presentation, if you're interested in doing that, just let me know and I can put you into contact with the colleague who can arrange a visit for you. I've included in the next image to show you how much content we're reporting on a typical day. So that's a screenshot of one of, it's a Tuesday, a random Tuesday. It's a schedule on our audio player. So although a few of those events are House of Lords events, most of them are in the Commons. So a typical Tuesday for us, if a couple of bills were going through committee stage, might involve 8 hours of chamber audio, 5 hours of Westminster Hall debates, maybe 12 hours of legislative committees, and perhaps 10 hours or so of select committees. I've also included there a screenshot of a Parliament Live broadcasting gallery, because the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit is also part of the Border Official Report team. And although it's currently not possible to navigate from Hansard to Parliament Live and back again, we very much see the video and the written record as two sides of the same coin, presenting a holistic account of parliamentary proceedings. So how is Hansard produced? In the House of Commons, Hansard colleagues work in two teams. One team works solely on the chamber, the other team works on everything else. All proceedings are recorded and reporters can access them using our audio playback software, and they work from offices across the estate. For efficiency in reporting a large volume of work quickly, we divide our work into chunks that we call turns and sections. So a turn is typically 5 minutes worth of audio, which is worked on by a colleague who is a reporter. A section is a longer segment, usually 15 or 20 minutes. So that's 3 or 4 turns stitched together. And that's worked on by a sub-editor who proofreads, sense checks, and may make further edits to aid the reader. Sub-editors are also responsible for publishing the report to meet tight deadlines. So all Chamber and Westminster Hall content is published online on a 3-hour rolling basis. And then legislative committees are published within 24 hours and select committee transcripts are delivered to committees within 72 hours at the latest. In order to report the chamber, colleagues work in a pre-designated list. It's a bit like a relay race that doesn't stop until the House rises each evening. The reporters attend the press gallery, passing a baton basically between each other to witness the proceedings that they're responsible for, and they then work on the copy back in the office. Reporters working on all other proceedings sign up to complete work on a priority basis according to deadlines. These reporters follow a live log of proceedings created by a colleague who attends the relevant forum for the duration of the event. So that picture on the right would be a colleague that's in the forum for the duration of the committee, while other reporters are reporting it remotely following his instructions. So this is providing like team members with instructions to help them report their turn accurately and information that cannot be gleaned easily from the audio or video. So in Hansard, the way in which we get the words onto the page has always been changing, from the dictation of shorthand to typists all the way through to the use of speaker-independent automated transcription. Just over half of our current editorial staff choose to edit speech-to-text output over typing from scratch, and that choice generally depends on factors like physical stress, individual cognitive preference, and the specific nature of the content to be reported. After using a selection of off-the-shelf and bespoke transcription tools over the years, we have, over the past few months, been working alongside parliamentary digital service developers to create an easy-to-access solution that's supported in-house. The product will be ready to test in live work following the summer recess, and the image on the left there is a screenshot of the transcription portal's landing page. I'm going to cut off a little bit of my words, but basically the most important part of our process is the production and publication software that we use. As you can see, it's basically a Word add-in, and it enables document creation, management and publication with strict version control and user audit trails. We call it HRS, the Hansard Reporting Suite, and it's very, very old. So the code is over 20 years old now, and it's definitely coming to end of life. At the creation stages, styles and content controls are used to inform presentation and convey information. So you can see the colored content tags, which contain things like member identification numbers, so you can search online. And also those ones specifically actually contain information about the type of contribution, such as question, answer. Text and word markup language is converted to XML when Hansard users hit publish. So the replacement of HRS is something that we're calling HPP, Hansard Production and Publication, and that's the next big piece of work that PDS have started to develop in conjunction with the Hansard team. And Michael was part of the digital design team at the outset of the whole automated transcription and HPP project. So I'm going to pass over to him to explain the work that he's done. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you. Yeah, so as Charlie mentioned, I'm part of the digital design team at Parliament in Parliamentary Digital Service. And as you got a sense from Charlie's talk, there's lots of technology that's been introduced over many years in the parliamentary reporting team, looking at text, audio, and video. And one of the reasons why I wanted to take a step back and look at how all these work together is really to understand how reporters and editors are using these software types of tools in one. So starting this work, I was trying to think of how do we understand how this software is being used in context? And design ethnography is a way of trying to look at how people work in a very natural context, in a very natural way. So two aims I had with this particular piece of work was to observe and understand how Hansard reporters and sub-editors produce the official report. My interest is actually not only in the digital tools, but also paper, other objects, other things in the room. How do these all combine together to help them do their work? And secondly, is really to understand how we can identify unarticulated opportunities. Now, one of the great things about interviewing people is that you can ask them questions, they'll tell you answers. But actually, if you're doing that in a very narrow scope, you're only really going to get insights about the things you're asking about. So observing people naturally is a really important way to identify unarticulated opportunities. So ethnographic research is a way of doing open-ended observations. So interviews and those kind of things tend to happen over minutes, maybe an hour or so. Ethnographic research is really trying to observe people over many, many days. Secondly, ethnographic research is a way to understand what people do in a natural environment. And again, if you're doing an observation study or a usability test, you're taking someone out of their natural way of working and you're setting them up in this very constructed appointment type of scenario. But actually, ethnographic research is me going into the place where people are working. And then thirdly, ethnographic research gives us an opportunity to witness or gather unexpected insights. And I'll go into that a little bit more. Now, what did I observe? I was doing this work with both parliamentary teams in the House of Lords and also in the House of Commons. So in the House of Lords, they also have their own Hansard team. I was looking at trying to observe how they're reporting on different types of business going through the chamber, oral questions, and then the committee stage of a government bill. And also in the House of Commons, I was doing something very similar. Now, it might be the case that you look at oral questions, but in Parliament, the Commons and the Lords have very different ways of running the same type of business. So oral questions, for example, works very differently. So it's really important to understand how the two reporting teams work with these types of business. Ethnographic research is something that lends itself to lots of theoretical frameworks coming from many different academic disciplines. So I was very clear that I wanted to use, I have a very clear idea of what kind of theoretical frameworks I wanted to use to interpret what I was about to see and witness. First paper, which is really so digital systems are also very important, but also it's the paper they're using. What information is on the whiteboards on the walls? How does that information get transferred from one person to another? These are all really important factors. And then also information flow. So we often externalize information when you're working in a very complex, fast-moving environment. Your working memory can get overloaded, so sometimes you need to externalize the information. So you write something on the wall that everyone in your team can see. How do people create a shared understanding of knowledge, and how does that support the task at hand? also mention is that I spent a lot of time conferring with Charlie and lots of people in her teams going back and forth, because I think just trying to sense check, this is what I think. I'm really conscious of, have I represented what you're doing in the correct way? Because there's lots of potential for misrepresentation, not in a malicious way, but I think just as a researcher, you may not understand things you've witnessed in a very specialized area of working. So that was a little bit about how I've done that. In terms of what goes on in the day of life of a researcher, I'm involved in a different strand of work at the moment, but I think I'm always trying to look for opportunities to do this kind of work, even using ethnographic approaches, even though it may not necessarily be ethnographic research in a scope or academic sense, because I think trying to understand how systems are used in context is really important. And I think the question from at the back was about the Hawthorne effect and people changing their behavior. So yes, the Hawthorne effect is a cognitive bias. So when you're a researcher, people tend to subtly change their behavior because they know that you're there. And there's always an element of that. I think part of that was mitigated by the length of time that I was observing the people, the reports and the sub-editors I was working with. There's always an element from when they first see me, they're kind of like, oh, they're there to turn around and look at me. But after a while, they kind of fade into it. But actually, the tight time scales that people need to either write their turn or the sub-editors have to edit their section means they're really getting on with what they're doing. And then that's where you see the lecture behavior come out. And I did observations, I think over 2 or 3 days with the Commons and a similar amount of time in the Lords. So getting a sense of how people are working, lots of different people working over that length of time. Hopefully you start to see patterns emerging. You think, okay, maybe this is me, maybe this is just a natural way of their behavior, but I don't go on too long.
Hi, thanks for your question. It's really interesting. So I don't know about the specific piece of work that you're talking about, and I'm really keen to hear more about it. I think I would say there are lots of different approaches to reporting or transcription. Hansard has a very specific terms of reference for a reason, and the context in which people are speaking is very specific, delivering speeches in some kind of parliamentary forum. We actually approach select committee editing a little bit differently, so our terms of reference don't apply there because it is witnesses giving evidence to members. It's not people making a speech in the House of Commons. So we're a little bit more verbatim, we would say, I guess, than we would be otherwise, a bit more closer to sort of a court reporting kind of scenario. So I think there are some contexts in which you would want to retain things like, I don't really like saying this, but the ums and ers, which often people say, oh, Hansard gets rid of the ums and ers. We obviously do a lot more than that, but there are some contexts in which that information, those utterances actually give you information. I study linguistics at university, so I'm quite interested in this, and I'm very interested in forensic linguistics, so I'd love to have a chat about that a bit more afterwards.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Charlie and Michael, thank you very much indeed. Talk amongst yourselves for 60 seconds before we hand over to Katie, because I'm just going to see if we can get everyone back online with the slides. Thank you for bearing with us through our various technical issues today.
Yeah, that's what headlines do. Yeah, I think the story was. I guess
Thank you very much for bearing with us, everyone. If you're joining us online, you can hopefully hear and see the slides again. I'm seeing some, am I seeing thumbs up? Yes, excellent. Our next speaker tonight is Katie. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you very much. My visual laid down. Okay. Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you. Thank you for having me, Gavin, and the team. I'm Katie Thorpe. I'm here to talk about board game Churn, which is something that I co-developed with Melissa Jogi from the University of Roehampton, who is not here tonight because she's on holiday. But I will explain a little bit about how this all came about. So I'm going to cover what motivated me to sort of start thinking about this, how we designed it, about the game itself, so you get a sense of kind of what happens, and then how it might be used and developed further. I'm going to start with a little bit about me, just because there's a couple of things that are relevant. So I started my career in, of all things, auditing. I don't know if there's any other auditors in the room, shout out. Yes, very good. And after a few years, I moved into training other auditors, which I found much more in tune with the way that I like to work and things I like to do. But I am not a government insider. So I started my career 13 years actually in auditing and training and became a learning and development specialist. The other relevant thing about it is that I have worked with a lot of quite unpromising material when it comes to training. For example, internal financial controls, etc. So anything to do with government is extremely engaging compared to some of that stuff. But I was always trying to find ways to make it interesting for the people who are on the training courses that we covered. So the more relevant part of my career is that I joined the Institute for Government in 2013 as a learning development specialist. And it quickly became apparent to me that although I thought of myself as quite well informed because I read The Guardian, I actually did not know anything about government and parliament and how they worked. So things that I realised I didn't know, we could be like, never have I ever, you know, stand up if you didn't know these things or don't know them now. The actual difference between government and parliament, that was very hazy. The process of legislation, I mean, I guess I knew what a law was, but I had no real understanding of how that happened in practice. I knew there were civil service departments, and because of my contemporaries at university, I knew that they were paid different things in different departments. But I did not understand how policymaking works, nor did I understand why people were suddenly in charge of, for example, reforming child support or regulating railways when I could see no obvious experience that they brought to the table. I didn't know what ALBs were, or quangos as we call them then, and I knew absolutely nothing about devolution, local government, how anything is funded, etc. Now, as somebody who read The Guardian, which doesn't sound like much, but was compared to most of the people at Deloitte, not just that, my parents were politically engaged. I am a white, privileged, educated person, and my degree was in history, which, you know, enabled me to, I actually studied politics and government to some degree, and yet I didn't really know how any of this stuff worked. So my point is, what hope for the rest of the country? There are lots of reasons why people don't know how these things work. Partly it is complicated. When you're running a training course and the answer to many questions is, I don't know, 17th century Cromwell something something, you know you're not looking at the most accessible, sensible things to be trying to explain. But more than that, there is no reasonable, systematic attempt to educate people in this country about how this stuff works, really, in theory, let alone in practice. I did like a term of politics at school. I still think John Selwyn Gummer is the agriculture minister as a result. But we really do not do this stuff well in this country, partly because it's so complicated, I guess. And there's just not that kind of familiarity with these concepts in everyday life that I think you do get in other countries. So that's also that. There's obviously a bunch of misinformation out there. We've got polarized debate. These days, the general conception is, people in government are probably incompetent or stupid or corrupt. Why else could we be having such bad policy all the time? So I joined the Institute for Government. I found that, I didn't think that was my impression beforehand, but I did find out the government is full of really smart, really well-intentioned people, really diligent, and I'm including the vast majority of politicians in that as well as civil servants and other officials, and people who want to do good things, but it's hard. And I learned a lot about why those things are so difficult. Partly it's just the situation we're in. It's called democracy, and it means that there is media scrutiny, and there is having to get votes, and there is short-termism, and that is baked in. But it's more than that. As people here, who's here as a civil servant? Not that many people. Well, let me tell you, there is some institutional stuff going on in the civil service that makes it very difficult as well to make policy well in the way that people all want to. So I said I worked at the Institute for Government. I haven't said very much about it, but it is a think tank that tries to make government more effective. And I think I probably went on a similar journey to David Sainsbury, who is the main funder of the Institute for Government. He joined government as a Lords Minister, having been running Sainsbury's for a long time. He then worked in Tony Blair's administration as a business minister. And he thought, this is weird, like government does not work as well as Sainsbury's. He was sort of struck by how he was trying to do much more complex, difficult things, but actually the support he got was much less. Where he and I differ is that he's a billionaire and was able to call on the best and the brightest to form this think tank, to look at it systematically, give them a lovely fancy building in central London. And I'm not even a thousandaire, so I've just done a board game. But that kind of difference between what you expect to happen and what you actually found out is what I really wanted to try and express in this form. So what I wanted to do was create a game where you could explain the system a little bit, lightly satirize it, but not going the full thick of it, and put you in the position of a team of diligent civil servants trying to do their best to create good long-term policy, but barriers come up in the form of political pressures, your minister going rogue, short-term crises to deal with, and the other thing which you may know about the civil service is that there is a huge amount of churn, hence the name. People change jobs all the time, the ministers do, and of course the civil servants do. That is for lots of cultural and structural reasons, which I'm happy to discuss later, but it is a fact. I think we all can agree that it is something that happens. So people change jobs just as they're getting the hang of it. And I wanted to find a way to sort of represent that in board game form. Now, because I'm a SWAT, I also wanted to layer on some stages of policymaking in government and include some things about good practice, like using evidence, welcoming scrutiny, and consultation, having people involved with expertise from the start of the process and so on. So all those are baked into the game as well. So what I did was I was churning it over for a long time, churning again. I think I talked to Gavin about it in the pub, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years ago. So I've got this idea for a game, don't know how it would work. And eventually I thought, okay, I'm just going to try and do this. So I made a PowerPoint deck. I kind of mocked up a board. I made a lot of cards, just did them on paper. Very proud of myself, working out that you need to put the text on the back upside down if you're going to print it out, using all my skills acquired in training. And I printed it out and we had a few playthroughs, but nothing else had happened at that point. And then I was contacted by my collaborator, Melissa Jogi, who had been on one of my courses and said, look, your 26,000 slides were lovely, but I would like to do something really engaging with my team, and I've got a bit of money. And I said, well, funnily enough, I've sort of half designed this board game. She's like, brilliant, we'll do that. She had some experience in game design as well, and we worked together. She was able to access some academic money, which meant we could actually produce it properly and engage the services of a graphic designer. And we were able to come up with something that looked real, an actual board. There we are. And a load of play pieces and cards and so on and so forth. And we launched it in October of 2025. And because Melissa, unlike me, is a publicity genius, she invited Civil Service World, who did a nice write-up of it. And she got various bits of publicity along the way. Okay, I'm just going to pause on the process for now and just tell you a little bit more about the game itself. We're frozen. Not in a let it go way. Oh, Gavin has pressed a magic combination of buttons. Okay, so I've just pretty much covered all of this. I'll just let you read it because I put it up there. How much time have we got? Sorry, your clock didn't start. Okay. So that was why we developed it. What are the key concepts? So it is to create a policy that works and stands the test of time. So you, as a team of civil servants, you work for a minister. You have different types of staff who generate different types of resources. The longer your staff stay in post, this is the crucial bit, the more productive they get. You use resources that they generate to respond to short-term policy demands. They pay for resilience activities that help your policy work effectively. And you also can use that resource to recruit more staff just in case you lose some along the way, which you definitely will. The game is played over 6 rounds, sort of representing a parliament, so the kind of the time between elections. Here are the types of staff that you have. So we have a policymaker. So these are your, what we try not to call now generalists, but people who are actually working with the minister to create submissions, design policy, give them options and so on. Also used to respond to events and recruit staff. We've got analysts who produce evidence tokens, which support the policy. We have operations people. So these are frontline workers who you might involve early on to get a sense of how things will work in practice. And then you have experts who can create any resource that you need. And this just kind of represents the rest of society who are interested in the policy area, not necessarily academics, but maybe people in industry, people with lived experience, and so on. So those are your resources. Each round of the game is a different stage of policy development. In phase A, you find out a bunch of things that happen. So volatility in the country may increase. Things happen to your minister, or they perhaps disgrace themselves a little bit, which affects their political capital. There are policy events, things you have to respond to in the short term. And you also have to roll a couple of dice and see whether you lose any staff that turn. If so, you don't get to choose which ones. You have to pick them out of a bag, which is my understanding of how it works in practice. And then in phase B, players make decisions about how they're going to respond to those events. So after they've dealt with all of those things, if they've got enough resource left over, they can do a consultation, or they can prepare some legislation, or they can create an arm's length body or something like that, or they could just recruit more staff to replace the ones that they have inevitably lost. So the rest of this is really just some examples of the cards and things, so you can see the sort of things that are involved. So these are your volatility events. That one on the right. I said these are mostly, nearly all of the cards are based on real events. I don't think we've won the Ashes recently. Okay, so those are volatility events, and as volatility increases through the game, you get more churn and you get more cards that you have to respond to. These are some of the political events. Scrutiny is something that happens when you buy a policy activity. You increase the amount of scrutiny on your policy, so it just introduces another decision about how much scrutiny do I want to welcome. So there we go. Obviously, I've tried to write funny little headlines, so that was one of the ways in which I've tried to make this feel like an entertaining game, rather than just a depressing walk through civil service institutional issues. Okay, policy events. These are some of the things that your teams may have to respond to. Does anyone know? So the fullest possible use, does anyone know where that comes from? That's a quote. It is really obscure. It's from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's something that Hal says. And the one I'm most proud of, obviously, is "Woke Me Up Before You Go." Okay, so those are the policy events. And then we have these resilience activities, which you can buy to help with your policy, to make it more resilient. You use your resources to buy them. It gives you some points at the end of the game, but also it attracts a certain amount of scrutiny. There are 2 resilience activities available in every round, and one is kind of the macro version, and one is the sort of mini version. And also, to help you, you have special abilities. Each team gets 1 special ability as well. So I will demonstrate the game later on for anybody interested, and you can see a little bit more about how it works in practice. In terms of how this has worked, so a few things that have happened. So this is our launch event in the middle there. That's Melissa on the left, me in the middle, and I think like the Vice Chancellor dude on the right. He was very much like, I'm here. And hopefully he's not tuning in. Thank you to Roehampton for their very generous sponsorship of the event. So we launched it, and since then we have, off the back of that and the publicity that Melissa managed to generate, we have done sessions with the Royal Society for their Westminster Week pairing scheme, which was brilliant. We've done some work with UKRI policy fellows, so these are academics doing placements within government. We've done a session with Universities UK, with the British Academy, and with the ESLC policy engagement team. So we have mostly been at this kind of research interface. I've done a lot of work with academics before, so this is kind of a lot of our networks are. And we think it works well for people who are about to engage with government, but maybe not just those people. But this is what we think, how we think it can help researchers or other people seeking to engage with policymakers. So demystifying, helping people understand how things work and why policy is not always based on evidence. And what's next? Some possibilities. At the moment, we're sort of around this kind of fun experience, policy taster, or maybe a tool that supports policy engagement. Maybe this could be used by academics in a more scaffolded way to help people who have got grants understand how to get impact. Maybe, this is probably where my heart lies, as you can tell from my initial talk, could we roll it out as a version more widely that people could do and kind of actually reach some people to explain a little bit more about how this all works, demystify it and so on, and maybe ultimately replacing Monopoly. Can you believe Monopoly is the most popular game to play on Christmas Day? It blows my mind. But anyway, maybe this could be something that disaffected civil servants buy each other for Christmas. That's it. I would welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. We are back online, so I have an online question. Are there any in the room as well? I'll take them in a group. We've got 2 questions there, so I'll come to you shortly. First question online. I can answer this one. Have your sessions been playtesting sessions to gather feedback from players and iterate on the game design, or do you consider the game finished? So we've got that one, and let's see the 2 questions from that table as well. I'll go first.
So I'm 16 and I'm a youth engagement and consultancy practitioner. So I essentially work with organizations and help connect with young people. So one of the things I wanted to ask about is that could you expand more on sort of your ideas of connecting with schools and
Fantastic, thank you. And there.
Hi, so I just want to say I think the game's fantastic, and I would say that with a lot of the accent. But my question is basically around policy and public trust. So I recently asked several policy professionals about what they thought eroded public trust with residents. And they said it's between policies and how it's received by like citizens. So based on your opinion, you know, having done all this much again, what do you think could close that gap between how policy is designed and how it's received?
Fantastic. So I'm just going to repeat that for our recording and people who listen to us online. So we've got sort of policy and public trust, closing the gap, how you relate to schools, and whether you're still play testing it. I'll try to come to you at the end, but I'll take these ones first.
So are we still play testing it? I would say this is version 1.1. So we did a lot of that initial kind of, you know, paper-based working through it. There's always lots of little tweaks and adjustments you have to make. You don't want it to be too depressing or too easy, although we discovered the feedback is better when people do well. So we tweaked a little. So yeah, there's still, but there is definitely still iteration to be done. I don't think it's the finished product yet. We've got a version that works, and it works fine as a training tool. You would have to do a lot more iteration to get it to the point where you could just hand it over and say, you can have fun with this on your own, or you could learn something on your own. So that's one of the things to explore is, can you make it either more compelling as a game with much more replayability value? Could you do it into something which is more clearly an educational tool but supports that more explicitly? So there are different ways you could go, and yes, we are definitely still iterating, I would say. But it costs quite a lot to have a run of boards, etc. made, so you can't iterate too often if it involves more printing. What was the other questions?
Relating to schools and that policy and public.
Yes, yes. So in terms of schools, I would envisage this. I have thought of a way you could do a much more simplified version. There's a big question about how much of the value of the game is from having a facilitator there, as they currently do, talking through whether, what this looks like in practice and so on. Obviously, that is where a lot of value comes at the moment. If you were to turn it into an educational tool, you would need scale, and therefore you would need to create resources so that anybody could run it, basically. I would love to do that. That would be quite a lot of development, but very interested to chat further and see what that might look like. There are people that fund that kind of thing. There are people interested in democracy education. What I've seen, the gap, there's quite good stuff about Parliament. Parliament does outreach, and it sees that as part of its role, although haven't they just tried to bin the parliamentary outreach? Yep. But I think there is very little on government and how it works, and that is the bit I think that really is a big gap. So that would be what I would hope this would look to address a little bit. On public trust, that is such a great question. So how, I just think there is such little. Once you start to not trust, it becomes very difficult for you to hear anything other than excuses, I think. And I think it's quite interesting. Sometimes I use the analogy of every new government, when you're trying to get into a door and the lock's just not quite working, and everyone else is standing behind you going, just let me have a go. Even though it's the same key and the same lock and it's not going to work. But I think that was really the attitude of this current government, Andy Burnham notwithstanding, which was just let us in and we'll just be better and everything will work better. And of course, it's the systems that get in the way of that. So I think there's a real lack of willingness to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think we've lost that. They're probably trying to do the right thing. And we're starting somewhere else now. I think a lot of us, we're starting with, what are they doing? This is ridiculous. And that makes it very difficult. So I think some of it is genuinely just about not understanding how things work, why things are difficult, why it's necessarily messy and complicated. And so I think that is one of the big things. And I've seen this, so this is a bit of a weird tangent, but I did a session in the Isle of Man where I also have some of my in-laws, and they don't have any political parties. And the result of that is that everybody who is in government never gets elected again, because everyone thinks, well, they were rubbish, they're not getting elected, because there's no such thing as a safe seat. And I just think it's that attitude writ large across everything. It's so easy to criticise, and you've got the polarisation and the misinformation on top of that, and it makes it really difficult. You probably asked me what we could do about it. How do you close the gap? Yeah. I do think a lot of it starts with, let's have a systematic way of talking to people about this, which begins at school, which is threaded through popular programs. I mean, all civil servants or people that work in government will watch any program about government and go, oh my God, it would never work like that. The permanent secretary would never talk to the minister like that, all that sort of thing. But people just don't know how it works. And our two models are Yes Minister and The Thick of It. And I think really they've done quite a lot of damage over the years to perceptions of how things work, because people still look. I've done sessions with MPs, and one of the questions will be, are the civil service really trying to get in the way? Is it like this Yes Minister? We said, no, they didn't mostly agree with Brexit, but they did it, that's just not how it works. So I do think the public perception is really nowhere near where it is. I think it starts with school, but I think there could be a lot more to talk through how it works in practice within cultural systems as well, I guess.
I did a bit of play testing on it early on, and I had such a bad run of luck. I had to change the rules.
Yeah, that's probably right, yes. Yeah.
We had a question over there. Any others in the room? Very quickly. I'll squeeze those two in, and I've got a couple online as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Really very keen to hear. How do you design the value of the game? How do you measure it? Once the game is done, do people come back and say, I learned so much?
Yeah.
take it to the next part. What is the metrics that probably
Yeah.
similar question when you do designing in the research?
Yeah.
How are you measuring the value?
Yeah, great
Great,
question.
thank you. So how do you measure the value? I had a question there.
There's a game that apparently exists within the square mile about legislation.
There is. It's called Legislate. Yeah.
Has that, like, is there any other example of a game that tries to ask for similar questions to yours and how much is free?
So other games as well, and the ones that we've got online. Somebody asked a very practical question. Does the current version of the game need a moderator, or can it work on its own with just written rules? And somebody says, what would you change if you did it all from scratch?
Ooh, okay, those are very good and disparate questions. So on the valuation, I actually started my career doing learning evaluation. I read a book about it, and I got halfway through and thought, oh, you can't really do this, it's too hard. And I never finished the book. Actually, maybe the answer would have been in the second half. It's really hard to do, but it is something that we want to take seriously. And we have got some, I think we have some funding at Roehampton to actually try and work out, can we demonstrate that this form of learning is more effective than non-super engaged methods, but also compare it with maybe the control group that don't do anything and see how they do. So I think that's mostly a watch this space, but it is a great question. Some of it is going to be anecdotal and some of it you will just never be able to record, but I think it's a really valid thing and something that we will certainly look to do. What was the question? I can't remember.
Legislate.
Other games, yes. So there's actually, when you design a board game, you discover that it seems like everybody else has also designed a board game. So there is, I know one that the policy profession has recently done on how to develop policy aimed at policymakers specifically. I know that there are a couple, so I know that the Open Innovation team has designed one to help academics engage with government, treading on similar territory. I also know the University of Nottingham have done one. None of those were inspiration for mine, but I think they are all doing slightly different things and could be very complementary to each other, I think. The Legislate game is also one that we looked at and is very good at a very specific thing around how legislation works. Yeah, it's definitely an educational one. Yes. So I think I'm very interested to find out more and will take inspiration from anywhere. And there are more games than you would think out there. Do you need a moderator? Currently, yes. As I was saying, part of my ambition for the game, or our ambition, is to maybe get to the point where you can support sessions being run without it. That would take quite a lot more development, I think.
And if
Thank
you
you,
were
Gavin.
doing it from scratch,
Oh.
what would you change?
I don't know yet, really. I feel like we're still sort of along the journey. I might need to come back to that when we're a little bit further along. I probably would have the ministers behaving a bit less disgracefully. I feel a bit, just if you're doing this, it's possible to get 6 ministers resigning through 6 different scandals. And that, I would say, I would probably moderate that a little bit.
Pretty well. Katie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And as Katie said, for those of you in the room, there will be, that's what you can contact
What's that
Katie if you'd like. We've got someone online who says they'd love to come and play if you're running a session in London. And is there a policy delivery expansion pack?
There are no expansion packs yet.
But for those of you in the room, you can have a look at Churn in action shortly. I'm the only thing between you and the free pizza, so I'm going to hurtle through some very quick parish notices. I'll let Katie sit down. These will all come around via email as well. Some things that we're sort of also involved in or think you might be interested in. Policy Camp, we ran an unconference for 240 policy people last week. Thank you. You can sign up for, we're going to have to do it again next year. So sign up to the mailing list and there will be a report on what was discussed this year. National Conversations, that is a project from Gordon Guthrie, who you can listen to at TransformGov Scotland in a few weeks, about trying to get politicians more interested in digital government. Civic Punks, one of our funders, Derek Alton, is currently going around the world visiting interesting people doing interesting things in government. Check out civicpunks.com. I run an event series called Data Bites, which is hopefully going to make a return in the autumn. You can sign up for details of that. that. It's very quick fire. It's much more fun than the D word might suggest to some of you. The National Strategy Project was something that Catherine Day talked about when she presented at TransformGov Talks. That's getting up and running. Again, all of the links will be in the email. GovCamp Scotland, big unconference, people who want to make government better in Scotland, 21st of September. GovCamp Cymru, the Welsh equivalent, 6th of November. All of those links will come round. A reminder that we have summer drinks on the 26th of August. Do come and join us. I can see the phones coming up for the QR codes, so do come along. Again, all of this is on our website as well. Remember that in September, we will be in Wales for the first TGT Cymru. Join us in Cardiff or online. And you can join online as well for TransformGov Scotland. There might be some in-person places, but it's actually at the Palace of Holyrood House. So there's sort of very tight security on that. Because obviously here at the MOJ, it's incredibly lax. Again, a reminder that if you would like to help us out, organise, speak or sponsor, you can talk to us, get in touch, transformgovtalks@gmail.com. If you'd like to help us out, tell someone how much you enjoyed tonight. Encourage them to sign up on the website. That's transformgov.org.uk. All that remains for me to say, a very big thank you to all of you for coming. We had some great questions, great discussion. I hope that will continue over pizza, which will be at the back of the room. But before we do that, please join me in a huge thank you to our brilliant speakers tonight, Charlie, Michael, and Jason. Pizza is served. And for those of you online, thank you for bearing with us through those technical issues.
Oh, good. Yeah, go to favorites. Oh, yeah.
Can I just recap that whole section?
They could use one of those every day house sits.